Good afternoon, and welcome to the March installment of the American Antiquarian Society's virtual book talk series. My name is John Garcia, the Society's Director of Scholarly Programs and Partnerships. We are coming to you from the ancestral homelands of the Nipmuc tribal community, who have made an active and vibrant presence here in central Massachusetts. Today's program features Duncan Faherty, who will speak about his new book, The Haitian Revolution in the Early Republic of Letters, Incipient Fevers, which was recently published by Oxford University Press. Our program is sponsored by the Program in the History of the Book in American Culture. These virtual book talks highlight recent scholarship broadly related to print culture, book history, and material texts. And now a little background information for those new to the Society. The American Antiquarian Society was founded in 1812 by the printer Isaiah Thomas. Our goal is to foster a deeper understanding of the American past, grounded in our ever-growing collection of primary sources, which include rare books, manuscripts, newspapers, the graphic arts, and much more. The Society fosters an inclusive community of inquiry through our public programs and generous support for scholarship. We welcome researchers from around the world to come and use our collections, both physical and digital, to help them with their projects. To learn more about us, please visit our website, americanantiquarian.org. Today, I'm joined behind the scenes by my colleague, Stephanie Corrigan. Throughout the program, Stephanie will post relevant information into the chat. She'll also provide information on how to purchase Duncan Faherty's book, and also to tell you when to use the Q&A function later in the program. As a reminder to all, today's program is being recorded, and it will be available on the AAS YouTube channel in the near future. We greatly thank you for joining us today, and as a nonprofit organization, we greatly appreciate any support you can give to further our mission. And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Duncan Faherty is Associate Professor of English and American Studies at Queens College and the Graduate Center at CUNY. He is also the Acting Director of CUNY's Committee on Globalization and Social Change. Duncan is the co-editor of the journal Studies in American Fiction, and with Ed White, he is the creator and co-editor of Just Teach One, a digital humanities project which has been housed by the American Antiquarian Society since 2012. Duncan is the author of his first book, Remodeling the Nation, The Architecture of American Identity, 1776 to 1858. And his writing has appeared in journals such as American Quarterly, American Literature, Early American Literature, and Reviews in American History, amongst many other venues. And today he's going to talk about his most recent book, The Haitian Revolution in the Early Republic of Letters. And now it's my pleasure to turn things over to Duncan.
Thank you so much, John. And thanks, Stephanie, for all your work in making today possible. And thanks to all of you who have joined us on Zoom today. I really appreciate it. Your being here, and it's really my pleasure to have this opportunity to talk with you today. So obviously, this image has not been pulled from the holdings of the American Antiquarian Society. But rest assured, if your intention was to log into a book talk about the early American Republic, you are indeed in the right place. I wanted to begin by asking you to consider this image because my new book, The Haitian Revolution in the Early Republic of Letters, Incipient Fevers, concludes with a consideration of the viral afterlives of this photo. My book ends with a reading of the complex social media circulation of this photo in order to trace how my arguments about the early republic's preoccupation with the Haitian Revolution continues to inflect our own present conceptions of liberation and justice. In other words, my coda considers the widely divergent politicized reactions to this image to chart how the early American cultural obsession with the meaning of the Haitian Revolution for the early American Republic still resonates within how we currently understand freedom and belonging. My book contends that the print public sphere of the early US was saturated with accounts of and references to the Haitian Revolution. In re-examining this voluminous but long-neglected archive, I move to diagnose how and why these textual objects have long been ignored or glossed over by American literary historians. Across the length of the book, I argue that the primary reason for this refusal to engage with the vast archive of early American Haitian tales stems from how the United States, from its earliest moments, always sought to imagine itself as a free, white, slave-holding republic. By declaring the first 2 decades of the 19th century, the era in which these early American Haitian tales dominated the print public sphere, and the period that my book focuses on, as a barren period of cultural production, Americanists have sublimated the unprecedented and unaccounted for impact of the Haitian Revolution on American culture. Critics have routinely downplayed the force of Haiti on the American imagination in service of promulgating a progressive notion of American development, one in which conceptions of belonging and freedom were always already expansive and ever more inclusive. To allow these early American Haitian tales to occupy even a small space in the American canon would force the field to acknowledge the ways in which early Americans sought to restrict sovereignty in response to diasporic African self-liberation. To allow these texts into the canon would mean that the field of American literary history would have to confront the central anti-Blackness at the heart of these myths about progressive inclusion. In short, it has been far easier to declare the early 19th century devoid of cultural merit and skip over it than have to grapple with the ways in which these conservative and at times fiercely anti-democratic texts haunted America's sense of its own past, present, and future. As we can see in the urgent demands emblazoned in this sign, this popular notion of progressive American development fundamentally obscures the ways in which the project of freedom remains far from inclusive or complete. Indeed, by referencing Haitian liberation, by calling back to a moment of profound Black liberation in 1804, this sign declares that the United States still actively denies any meaningful connection between the Haitian Revolution and American history. Moreover, it implies that it does so as a means of continuing to suppress freedoms for African Americans. While it would be misleading to say that this photo was the inspiration for this book, it is in fact true to say that stumbling across it made me think about the stakes of this project in a very different way. For almost a decade before discovering this photo, I'd been scouring the obscure byways of the early American print public sphere for evidence of literary and cultural investments in thinking about the import of the Haitian Revolution for the early American Republic. That archival work would have simply been impossible without both physical trips to the American Antiquarian Society and copious amounts of time roaming around and through various indispensable AAS digitization projects. And I think our field couldn't exist without the American Antiquarian Society, or exist as it is. But like many an academic struck with archive fever, there were times during the collecting and reading that I lost sight of both the forest and the trees. It was one thing to rediscover long neglected materials. It was another matter to come to terms with why it had been actively locked away and dismissed as unworthy of attention. Enter this photo, or I should say the viral afterlives of this photo, which brought into focus that my object of study was not simply a neglected gap in American literary history. Looking at the myriad reactions to this photo, which spread like wildfire across the internet in 2020, it became clear to me that the rich and dramatic literary history I had been immersing myself in was important because of how it demonstrated that Haiti inspired contending visions of freedom and resistance, visions which took root in the early 19th century, but still very much speak to the modern world. The book, in short, moves to exhibit how and why Haiti was erased from the white American imagination, and why there has been such a canonical devotion to maintaining that erasure. As such, my aim in the book is to both gesture towards recovering the actual impact of Haiti on the early US might mean for both of our understanding of American history, but also to expose the role that American literary history and American cultural studies played in privileging certain forms of belonging over and against more radical figurations of freedom and possibility. This photo was originally posted on June 2nd, 2020, and was taken at a Black Lives Matter protest in Boston. That's the Boston, Massachusetts State House in the background, in the wake of the murder of George Floyd just a week earlier. Looking at the image allows us to see, I think, the embodied urgency in representing Haitian self-emancipation as a vital precursor to contemporary American social justice reforms. Indeed, there is something powerful, something loving in the expressions of solidarity and connection inscribed in this sign. And that power was not unnoticed, since very soon after its original posting, the image quickly became too viral and indeed oppositional text. The tension between these two interpretations lays bare the way in which Haiti the tensions between these two interpretations lays bare the ways in which Haiti has had two very different functions in the American imagination. The first of these discourse streams circulated as an affirmation of the connections between Haitian liberation and histories of oppression in the United States. The second counterformation eerily echoed early 19th century white supremacist disgust over Haiti's independence in uncanny ways, as if these alt-right social media users had been reading through the same periodical archives as I had been. On the one hand, there were numerous affirming reactions to the photo, and there were literally thousands of repostings of this image across a variety of social media platforms, which positively co-signed the sign's theorization of a long hemispheric history of resistance to anti-Blackness. This discourse stream essentially endorsed and signal boosted the idea that the Haitian Revolution had changed world history. Yet for many on the alt-right, this image somehow revealed that Black Lives Matter activists were foreign agents intent on fomenting violent retribution on the white American Republic. Perhaps not surprisingly, for anyone who understands the political ambitions of the alt-right, the image was placed on a variety of far-right meme generator sites. These are websites that have images that can be reposted on social media accounts very easily and kind of work as a way to spread far-right conspiracy theories and mainstream white supremacist ideologies. The hate speech of this counterformation denounced the sign's insistence on an emancipatory vision of history to reactivate a conservative early American understanding of the Haitian Revolution as representing a threat to the foundational privileges of the whitenesses that animate American democracy. Refusing to comprehend "we got you" as an expression of Black solidarity, these alt-right social media users attempted to convince others that the sign presented proof of an international conspiracy to eradicate the United States. In essence, these white supremacists insisted that 1804 could only mean a call for white death and a seizure of white property. These insidious alt-right posts actively sought to eradicate any conception of references to Haiti or 1804 as signaling a call back to a profound moment of Black liberation. But what was perhaps most startling to me as I read through this contemporary archive of hate was just how much this rhetoric that was being deployed mirrored that of conservative periodical commentaries and accounts about Haiti from the early 19th century. Now, obviously, there are all sorts of differences in terms of speed of transmission and capacities for simultaneity across geographic distance between our own contemporary digital media ecologies and the early American print public sphere. No question about that. Still, the intensity of partisan vitriol, the clever use of anonymity and pseudonymity to feign unbiased concern, and a deep-seated commitment to forging networks of affinity, to refute any attempts to reimagine foundational privileges, to change those foundational privileges in any way, suggests to me that our own moment shares a great deal in common with the early American print public sphere. And I would argue perhaps more so than at any point in between. Then and now, there was an intense cultural mistrust in the idea of an unbiased media source and a widespread addiction to consuming information from within an echo chamber of siloed belief systems. For example, one could easily compare the loaded anxieties about foreign invasions heading northward from our own current southern border to early 19th century fears about Haitian revolutionaries migrating to New York intent on wreaking havoc on the domestic order. In one sense, one could easily rip a shocking headline from 2024 and switch it with a similar one from 1804 without the need for much editing. While it might be concerns about buses instead of ships, the xenophobic and moral panic animating serial headlines across the 220-year gap remains the same. And unfortunately, in both cases, so too does the underlying investment in promulgating an unspoken but still pronounced synonymous relationship between whiteness and Americanness. So while I don't mean to make light of the crucial differences separating our own complex digitized print public sphere with the one in operation in the early republic, I do want to underscore how I think we can comprehend the complexities of the early American print public sphere by thinking about our saturation within a variety of contending media streams. Within this academic study of early American literary history has long privileged the revolutionary 1790s as the high point of early American cultural development, and the novel as the definitive early American genre. Yet, the vast majority of fictions that early Americans encountered and consumed was through periodicals. Seriality was, without question, the dominant mode of reading for the early Republic, just as it is, I think, for us today. While we might quibble with how to generically classify Twitter or Facebook posts, I think we all can agree that when we scroll through those feeds, we are constantly moving between facts and fictions, and often without much regard for these generic distinctions. The same could be said for the pages of an early 19th century newspapers, often more interested in signal-boosting rumors and conspiracies than in accurately registering facts about events. This is perhaps even more complicated when thinking about the early 19th century print public sphere, when outright fictions were often printed immediately adjacent with what we might consider factual accounts, and often without any kind of marker to indicate a shift in rhetorical aims or generic expectations. Consider by way of example, this reproduction of the table of contents for the January 8, 1798 issue of the American Universal Magazine. If you look, the third entry from the bottom in this photo marks an entry for a text called An Account of a Remarkable Conspiracy Formed by a Negro in the Island of San Domingue, here shortened by the editors to just A Remarkable Conspiracy. Again, it's just the third from the bottom. This text, here from that magazine itself, is also often published in the early Republic as the story of Mackendal, and this presents a highly stylized and much fictionalized account of an actual self-emancipated Haitian revolutionary who sought to liberate the island in the 1750s. And these reprintings are really about a way to kind of think about this 1750s history and what it means about the possibilities and potentials for success of the Haitian Revolution itself at the end of the 18th and early 19th century. This text, originally of French origin, circulated far and wide in the early American Republic, promiscuously reprinted in newspapers and magazines for decades, beginning in the 1780s, well into the 1840s. I trace the cultural life of this text in my first chapter, and for those of you interested in reading the text, I'm happy to say that it is freely available as one of the editions of the Just Teach One project that John mentioned a little while ago, that Ed White and I have founded in conjunction with the American Antiquarian Society. It's really about creating a set of free texts from the early 19th century. And we have an edition of this text in particular that's free on that site. And I think the links for those texts will be dropped into the chat. And I encourage you to please make use of them. But to return to the table of contents from the American Universal Magazine, you can see how readers were asked to consider this early American Haitian tale alongside such other items as the natural history of the cow, sort of in the middle of that table of contents, or debates of a female society, or as part of the serialized biography of the naturalist Dr. Fothergill. Readers in the magazine, in other words, were moving between and betwixt genres without any editorial apparatus, attempting to shape their expectations, much in the same way we might move across a variety of linked stories via Twitter or some other social media platform. The generic distinctions that we rely on so often now to do critical work really are kind of after the fact imposition rather than a reflection of how these objects were understood in their moment of production and consumption. Perhaps another way for me to make this point is to return to this photo for one last time in order to say that it would take little more than using an antiquated typeface for me to transform one of the alt-right blog posts, which widely circulated about this image, into a periodical commentary from 1804 about the Haitian Revolution. The pronounced fears, the animated concerns about Black liberation and what this means for the white American Republic are otherwise almost indistinguishable in really kind of horrifying ways. And while we might be tempted to want to believe that these white supremacist leanings only surface on the dark corners of the internet, on just one Reddit thread dedicated to an insidious reading of this photo, there are over 2,000 likes and over 600 individual comments. And that is just one posting out of thousands, For a brief period of time, the alt-right was so obsessed with the contemporary meaning of Haitian freedom for the American Republic in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, as their conservative ancestors from the early 19th century were anytime there was a moment of domestic unrest related to enslavement in the United States. I dwell on this to suggest that the lingering after effects of this active erasure of this early American obsession with deploying Haiti as the Black Mirror or as an antithesis of American democracy. In a sense, this neglect has created a foundational flaw in our accounting of American cultural history, one that mutes concerns about Black belonging and agency in favor of an ameliorating notion of gradual inclusion and a false sense of the United States as having moved beyond the structuring structures of the violent legacies of the Black Atlantic. Incipient Fevers aims to counter this tacit disavowal by registering just how obsessed early American readers were with the seismic force of the Haitian Revolution and its capacity to produce aftershocks in the American domestic sphere. When resituated within the early American Republic's ecosystem of Haitian intrigue, the figure of the fiery Black Haitian revolutionary on the verge of an American arrival resonates with considerable force. By disinterring these once popular texts and their neglected narrative patterns, the Haitian Revolution in the early Republic of Letters restores the nascent Haitian Republic's influence on early American national development. In so doing, this book delineates how American writers mobilized a variety of fantasies about Haiti to debate the parameters of the delimited forms of freedom that had been established in their own republic. Moreover, it charts how these multifaceted discourses about Haiti so often positioned it as the illiberal antithesis of US American democracy. Such discourses were abetted by an American foreign policy that minimized Haitian autonomy, as well as through racialized definitions of belonging taking root in the nascent American Republic's culture and society. In reckoning with how traditional literary historiography has silenced certain contexts around race, citizenship, representation, and freedom from orienting the field, my book aims to recuperate lost textual objects while redressing a crucial blind spot in American literary history. My subtitle, Incipient Fevers, echoes the acute anxiety conjured in the figuration of Haitian revolutionary ideologies, possibly infiltrating the American ethnoscape as a ravaging, indeterminable disease. Across the period examined in this book, the first 2 decades of the 19th century, a range of texts contended that any interaction with refugees from Haiti, Black or white, would precipitate radical unsettlements in the United States. The connotations of incipient, in other words, resonate with an array of meanings concerning the significance of Haiti for the early United States. This tendency to ignore the function of Haiti effectively endorses the incipient project of liberal modernity, which, as I think Lisa Lowe has persuasively argued in The Intimacies of Four Continents and elsewhere, self-consciously embraced discourses of emancipation and belonging while muting discourses of dominion and expulsion. Thus, a secondary ambition of my book is the cultivation of additional scholarly interest in the early 19th century by attending to how and why Haiti figured so prominently in shaping national development during an era so often imagined as a fallow period of cultural production. I mean, there are literally no texts from the period 1800 to 1820 in any edition of the Norton Anthology of Literature, for example. Our canonical notions of inclusion and progressive enfranchisement nurture a belief in a Whiggish liberal modernity, but can only do so, consciously or not, by excommunicating narratives and errors that trouble the nationalist paradigm. Texts that articulate a vision of the United States as a white ethnostate, and which advocate for rigid definitions of belonging, could not and cannot easily be accommodated by the field of American literary history's attachment and hereditary attachment to liberalism without exposing the limitations of this reliance. Concerns about Haiti saturated the early American print public sphere from the outbreak of the revolution in 1791 until well after its conclusion in 1804. The Gothic, sentimental, and sensationalist undertones of openly speculative periodical accounts accelerated within the genre of fiction, where the specter of Haiti was a commonplace trope. Haiti was not an enigma occasionally deployed by American writers, but rather the overt bellwether against which the prospects of national futurity were imagined and interrogated. The hauntology of Haiti operated as a habitus, a structuring structure which consistently served, to borrow a phrase of Avery Gordon's, as the thing behind the things. Ideological representations of Haiti infected the imaginations of early American readers, and this sickness, this excitement, and this shared fervor has yet to be fully acknowledged within American literary history. Outlining how Haiti haunts you as cultural production, Incipient Fevers maintains that these two revolutions were so interanimating that it should be impossible to conceive of them separately. The sheer volume of information about Haiti that circulated in the early American print public sphere, with reports appearing in newspapers on a quotidian basis for almost 2 decades, forms a quantitative challenge to these efforts at erasure. Likewise, the centrality of depictions of Haiti within the formation of early American aesthetic practices underscores the necessity of understanding this impact qualitatively. Unfortunately, scholars have long occluded how early Americans understood their nation as entwined with Haiti. To correct this mispractice, we need to consider how and why the futurity of the United States was deliberated over and against the Haitian Republic, which itself was almost simultaneously struggling for articulation. Finally, to reestablish this Haitian obsession necessitates recovering and more carefully examining the intricacies of non-canonical texts like the ones I examine in my book, since they form a central part of this early American Haitian archive. It is true that across the last 2 decades, a renewed attention to the Caribbean's socio-political impact on the development of the emerging United States has revitalized the field of early American studies by moving it away from its isolationist origins. Yet even as this development has been crucial, within literary studies at least, so much of this work remains grounded in a consideration of this novel, Leonora Sansay's Secret History, or The Horrors of Saint-Domingue, that the field of American literary history has replicated in its readings of this text a version of what Elizabeth Maddock Dillon has called intimate distance, while attending to the importance of the Haitian Revolution. By this phrase, intimate distance, Dillon means holding on to something so tightly, even as one tries to distance oneself from fully acknowledging that connection. As I explore in much more detail in the 4th chapter of my book, all too frequently, Sansay's Secret History stands privileged in classrooms and in canons and in conversations as a singularity, one that allows for a consideration of the Haitian Revolution as an always external event. The event is in effect recognized, but still held at a distance. Framing Sansay's text as the solitary repository of US reactions to Haiti surreptitiously reinscribes them as a secret history. So there's a bit of a game, right? Like, I'll teach you the secret history and it's revealing a secret history, but it remains a kind of separate history. Such a practice enables recognition and containment of the Haitian Revolution within literary historiography. Sansay's novel terminates with the American sisters returning to the United States after divorcing themselves from foreign connections. Given this conclusion, readers can still imagine that the inchoate American Republic, while it may be feverish, is not literally infected by an alien revolutionary contagions. In contrast, many of the other early American Haitian tales that I examine, and which have all largely remained neglected despite the increased attention to the Caribbean in early American studies, render such a fantasy of immunization unsustainable by again and again suggesting that the revolutionary fevers which ignited the Haitian Revolution were always already on the verge of outbreaks in the United States. Instead of ending with a gesture of willful foreclosure, as Sansay's Secret History does, these texts, novels such as Martha Meredith Reed's Monima or The Beggar Girl from 1803, or Isaac Mitchell's The Asylum, or Alonzo and Melissa, the most popular Gothic novel of the 19th century in the United States, and according to some folks, second only to Uncle Tom's Cabin, both pale in comparison to the Bible, but in terms of fiction, second only to Uncle Tom's Cabin in terms of 19th century sales in the United States, although complicated because this text is pirated and circulates in a variety of different editions. But these novels, like Munima and The Asylum, insist that borders between the US and Haiti are so porous and the economic connections between the two spaces so acute that to have any faith in the possibility of a successful revolutionary quarantine was always a ridiculous fantasy. These texts emphasize the contingencies involved in deciphering the meanings of Black Atlantic mobility and revolutionary migration by asking readers to think about the possible and indecipherable entry of Haitian refugees into the United States. Thinking about this wider array of texts, in other words, moving beyond thinking of Haiti as a secret history, registers how American writers working in a variety of genres and across several decades understood Haiti's impact as compounding rather than dissipating well after Haiti declared its independence in 1804. For all its promiscuous roaming across the Caribbean basin, Sensei's novel charts a round-trip voyage to Philadelphia. Shaken, but not necessarily infected by revolutionary fervor, Sensei's white American sisters presumably reintegrate into U.S. society without altering all too much the domestic order, although complicated by the novel's dedication to Aaron Burr, of course. The circularity of the text's geographical imagination provides one explanation as to why the text has so easily accommodated into the canon. Secret history, in other words, concludes with a return to a familiar space, one easily housed within the field's relentless privileging of an east-west axis for charting national development. By way of contrast, I would just point to another freely available text on the AAS Just Teach One website. And this is The Black Vampire or the Legend of Saint-Domingue, the first American vampire tale, which also relocates the origins of vampirism from Eastern Europe to Africa and connects the titular Black vampire protagonist to both various forms of African religions and Caribbean rebellions. More emphatically, the novella also ends with the vampire's infected son being raised in New Jersey and hints that once his son matures, he will bring his father's radical violence and resistance to white power to fruition in the United States. And that's the landing page for our edition of this text. So while there's much to admire about Sensei's novel, the overrepresentation of it within American literary history has perpetuated the false sense that Americans were not actually obsessed with that revolution breaking out on American soil as they so clearly were. As I think the Black Vampire, among other texts, makes clear. The text explored in Incipient Fevers undercut the solidity of the residual transatlantic compass by routing ideological questions along latitudinal lines of influence rather than longitudinal ones. In other words, I argue that our traditional sense of the political geography of the 19th century remains distorted by an inveterate privileging of the wrong nodal point as the prime meridian. Focusing on Cape Francois rather than Greenwich to accurately map how the early Republic of Letters plotted its own socio-political stability, I assert the primacy of Haiti within American culture across the first 2 decades of the 19th century. Incipient Fevers refigures the importance of early 19th century cultural production by charting how its geographical imagination strayed beyond the ostensible teleology of an Anglophilic transatlanticism. As such, I aim to complicate our understanding of how Western frontiers came to animate American culture by considering national expansion via the Louisiana Purchase as an underexamined byproduct of Haiti's struggle for emancipation. As an underexamined byproduct of Haiti's struggle for emancipation. With the idea being that if Napoleon wasn't in need of money to retake Haiti and restart its economy, he never would have considered selling Louisiana to the Americans. Contending with how domestic anxieties about social and cultural reproduction coalesced in response to the birth of an independent Black republic reveals how questions of diasporic African freedom were consistently indexed through Haitian liberation. In Incipient Fevers, Haiti becomes the locus for interrogating conceptions of U.S. national futurity by decoding how U.S. writers deployed Haiti to pose crucial questions about the limitations of American versions of Republican ideologies. In so doing, I explore serialized texts from the era's robust periodical culture and then moved to contextualize my readings of them by attending to how these same periodicals editorialize their reportage about events in Haiti. Selected in part for the way they collapse any spatial distinction between the US South and Caribbean plantations, these texts routinely emphasize the economic commonality of these divergent spaces via projected fantasies about quasi-laborless northern US agrarianism. For many Northeastern Federalists, Jefferson's election created the conditions of possibility not only for renewed political turmoil, but also for the licentious and undemocratic mores of Southern planters to upend the domestic social order across the entire nation. In the wake of their dismissal from political authority, a loosely affiliated Federalist intelligentsia labored to reassert their influence by blurring the boundaries between Monticello and Cape Francois. Essentially, these Federalist writers depicted these capitals of the corrupt plantocracy as counterformations to American national stability, past, present, and future. Other writers, perhaps less venomous in their distaste for Jeffersonianism, advocated for the US to forge economic circuits of exchange that would reduce dependency on enslaved labor to protect the nation against the fluctuations of circumatlantic trade. Hardly anti-racist or even necessarily abolitionist in tenor, these texts sought to secure the profits garnered by Black Atlantic capitalism by promoting new avenues of resource extraction in response to the problem of Haiti. Incipient Fevers surveys these various narrative iterations as a kind of textual archipelago, a cluster of independent but still alive formations open to examination both for their particularities as well as how the currents between them register submerged ligatures of connection. Treating the Haitian Revolution as a singularity fails to account for the protracted duration of the struggle, which lasted from 1791 to 1804, while depreciating the complexities of its unfolding. This critical redaction further condenses the import of Haiti to a universal sense of fear across the entirety of the United States. These residual habits of reading, which have for so long defined the approach of early American literary history, gloss over how American writers responded to shifting events in Saint-Domingue in tactical ways, fluidly reworking their emphasis depending on reflecting regional political affiliations or evolving economic visions for the United States. Recovery of the extent of early American fixations with Haiti requires, in short, scrutinizing the fluctuations of a multi-directional attentiveness instead of recursively adhering to teleological presumptions. Therefore, my book moves to engage the fluctuating import of Haiti on the American imagination, both during and after the Haitian Revolution. Given that so many early 19th century American texts overflowed with concern about Haiti, it's been easier to ignore cultural production from this period altogether than to cherry-pick objects easily accommodated within the confines of a progressive canonicity. Or to put it another way, many of the texts published during the early 19th century interregnum present a constitutive challenge to a liberal canon formed around progressive conceptions of national development. My book, in other words, moves to inventory the shortfalls of our canonical formations by focusing attention on these first 2 decades, when an obsession with Haiti was paramount in the US public sphere, and when the specter of Haiti was acutely present in the white imagination. Despite this intensity of interest for American writers and readers alike, or more likely because of it, the period from 1800 to 1820 has remained largely unexplored. And I am seeking to correct this mispractice and call further attention to what has long been the most neglected period in American literary history. As the book sort of tries to think through these larger questions about field formation, to offer an accounting of how and why the early 19th century has for so long been declared a no man's land, it moves to build a bridge across several subfields of American literary history. First and foremost, I argue that early Americanists and those working in the middle of the 19th century need to do a better job of understanding how early American Haitian tales are the actual connection, the ligatures that connect their kind of discordant canons. And finally, to return to the powerful injunction of the photo, which celebrated the connections between Haitian liberation and African American freedom, my book ends by gesturing towards how Haiti provide a crucial index for early African American writers as they sought to reimagine the white supremacist legacies of early American culture. From the very first column in the first African American newspaper, the Freedom's Journal, founded in 1827 in New York, which makes consistent reference to Haiti as a space of possibility, to the first piece of African-American fiction, Teresa, A Haitian Tale, which is published serially in some of the earliest issues of Freedom's Journal. An African-American vision of Haiti as a site of possibility and self-determination arises, which refutes the delimiting attempts by white writers to curtail the meaning of Haiti for the 19th century. Teresa is another Just Teach One text, the first one produced by the Just Teach One African American Project, also housed at the American Antiquarian Society, and is well worth your attention for how it links African American futurity to Haiti's struggle for self-determination, remarkable for what may be the earliest piece of African American fiction that we're currently aware of. And so my project ends where this talk begins, by asking readers to think of the two ideas of Haiti, which have ghosted the American imagination since the early part of the 19th century and continue to shape how we understand freedom and belonging in our contemporary world. Thank you so much for coming today, and many thanks to John for having invited me, and to Stephanie for all her work in making today possible. I look forward to shifting gears and having a chance to answer some of your questions now. Sorry, I think I went on a little bit long, but thank you so much for being here.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Duncan. That was fantastic. So as we proceed, just want to send a reminder to the audience that please put your questions into the Q&A function, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. Just to kick things off, Duncan, you talk quite a bit about periodical culture throughout the book, and it makes a fantastic point, right? I mean, it seems like, one of your claims throughout the book is that if we want to get a better, kind of more granular understanding of early U.S. fiction, the place to look is really not in a printed book, right? Or another way of putting it is that we look too much to printed novels to try to form a canon, so to speak. And it seems that you're saying that we're looking in the wrong place, right? We need to look at magazines, for instance. And I think one other kind of really interesting idea that you give in the early part of the book is this idea of what you call a discursive collage, right? Which is a kind of imagining all the different things that one might see on the page, right? You might see some news, you might see some rumors, and then you might see some fragments of a fictional story. And so my question is really, if you could kind of get us started to think more about periodicals, like why are they so interesting, and really also who might be reading them? Like, does this give us a better sense of what the public was like at the time?
That's a great question. And John, as you were talking, I was kind of noticing that both of us are in front of walls full of books, which is kind of funny, because I do think it represents in so many, I think probably the way both of us were trained. I think the way most of us were trained, right? I mean, and the way most of us teach, which is within the field of literary studies, is by privileging the novel in all kinds of ways, right? Partly for its ease of use, partly for the sense of its kind of weightiness as a cultural object. But I do think it's a kind of distorted sense of what and how people actually encountered fiction, but also as a kind of site of reading in general. I mean, working with periodicals is a little, it's one of the kind of foundational books in the field of early American studies is Revolution in the Word, right? Another book written by Kathy Davidson, much of it in the archives at the American Antiquarian Society, and sort of, she's attentive to the kind of histories of reading that looking at copies of books allow us to see. Right? Quite famously, the number of names of people inscribed in an edition of Charlotte Temple to get a sense of it as an object passed down between generations of women and treasured as a kind of artifact. And it's harder to do that with periodicals, obviously. People don't write their name on them and make marginal notes in necessarily the same kind of ways. And if they did, that's often not the copy that's preserved, right? As archives have to make choices about best copies to digitize or limited shelf space and preserving things. So some of that kind of ephemera of reading, I think, is probably not transmitted by periodicals and newspapers in quite the same way. But it is, I think, without question, how most people encountered fiction. And certainly we can think about numbers of subscribers to some of those periodicals compared to the number of copies of novels printed, for example, would give us one index. But beyond that, I think there's something about a kind of serial commitment of time of reading even a novel in a periodical over time that I think is asking a reader to stick with it in a different way than if they just have it on hand. And so I do in the book read a lot of novels, but I try to kind of think about the context in which they first appeared, often as serialized in magazines, and to think about what it means to read, 30 pages of Monima next to, for example, a kind of Americanized version of Wollstonecraft's work on the vindication of women. So if one's moving from a kind of text about a kind of a woman who's subject to all kinds of abuse and is food insecure and is a kind of French refugee from Saint-Domingue, and no one in the US will help her, alongside a kind of figuration of a protection of white womanhood, it's got to have an effect on a reader that I think it's useful for us to try to think through and think with. I don't know if that fully answers, I mean, your question had a lot of parts, but I think that notion of a discursive collage that I'm trying to get at is to think about what it means to kind of see these things next to one another and to be asked to move between them. Partly trying to get at that with that photo of the American Universal magazine that you're kind enough to send me, right? To think about how people are sort of thinking about Haiti in between, also thinking about cows and female social orders and Dr. Fothergill. Partly it's getting at the quotidian nature of it. I mean, these are things that are just saturated in their reading environment. But also the sense of like their equal importance and blurry distinctions.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, and it also goes back to what we said earlier about resonances with today, right? A kind of information overload, right? We have questions coming in. So we have Sandra Jackson Opuku asked the question here is, how do you view Juliet Kinsey's now disputed, though stubbornly repeated mid-19th century claim that Jean-Baptiste Dusabo was a native of Saint-Domingue?
I don't know if I can address that in some ways. And I will partly say that my answer to that is the book is really interested in how the early US thinks about Haiti. But I think there are all kinds of, I mean, another way of thinking about your question is the ways in which connection, or either imagined or real connections to Saint-Domingue or to Haiti get kind of mapped onto people as a way of thinking about their political functions. So I don't know if that answers your question in a way. But I will say that I make this point in the chapter I have that's about Macandal, who is a 1750s Haitian revolutionary. I'm at times less interested in the kind of accuracy of some of the information that circulated, but in the fact that it circulated, because I'm kind of interested in thinking about what those fantasy projections have and what they say about readers and thinkers in the US. I hope that answers your question in some way.
We also have a question here from Frederick Crosby, who asks this question of, is there a bibliography of Haitian-based publications from the 1804 era, either online or maybe they can reference when they purchase a copy of your book?
I don't have a kind of exhaustive bibliography within the book. I mean, I try to attend to lots of central texts. I do think that Marlena Doubt has and I'm not remembering the name of it, a kind of digital humanities project which aims to produce such a catalog of writing about Haiti and writings from Haiti, starting from the 18th century. But I can try to look that up and send you an email with that reference if I can't figure it out now. But her name is Marlena Doubt, and she's currently at Yale, I think. Is that right, John?
She definitely has there's a website where she's reproducing French language Haitian newspapers. So yeah, it's a great resource. We have a question here from Molly Hardy, who says, thank you, Duncan. This is wonderful. And may I ask you to please address where in the history of early American bibliography that the focus on the novel as the definitive format began. So where did this emphasis begin as the novel as the kind of what it means to study American literature? And if you would also share any thoughts you have on the ways in which digitization has transformed or not our understanding of formats in early American print cultures.
Molly, thanks so much for the question, and it's great to virtually connect with you. At least I can't see you, but thanks for attending. I think that the U.S. attachment to the novel speaks to kind of larger patterns within literary studies, so be it French, Spanish, or English literary studies, where the novel has always been kind of privileged, right? And then I think from Ian Watt forward, making the case that the novel is the kind of index of social order. And I think that early US literary studies follows that to a degree, in part to sort of suggest that we have these objects that are equal to those of European traditions, right? I think it's also true for much of the 20th century. It's just far easier to teach novels than it is to teach serialized texts, right? I mean, your choices are usually an anthology or novels, right? And in terms of how you can deliver reading material to students, I think that, so digitization has affected things in some ways. It's, I think, dramatically shifted what it is possible to teach. I can, either using a variety of digital repositories that are free and online. So, for example, the Freedoms Journal is free online through the Wisconsin Historical Society, or if you're an institution that has access to various digital repositories that have been created out of the holdings of the AAS, you can lead students into those archives and ask them to look at things in a way that would not have been possible without a special trip to a library 20 years ago, 30 years ago when I was in college. And so I think that kind of just asking students to think about print materials is quite different. Getting the second part of your question, Molly. I think, certainly the kind of work that one can do is, I think, vastly different, not simply just with having access to materials, but the increasing sophistication of search tools, I think allows for a kind of mapping of reprinting, right? And so another thing that I think, and maybe this circles back to John's first question, that kind of thinking about periodicals and readership, is you can begin to trace the ways in which newspapers across the country are reprinting a story. And I think, and I lean a lot on early kind of bibliographic projects that people did in the early part of the 20th century or the middle of the 20th century. And it's amazing to me that someone like could have done that work. I mean, it's sort of the Pritchard's volume of short fiction that I talk about in the first chapter quite a bit. He's doing that work just literally being in an archive. It's incredible to think that he kind of was able to amass all of that in some ways. And I think now we can begin to see how these texts circulate and are reprinted across platforms. So digitization, I think, has dramatically changed things.
Great. We do have time for several more questions, and there's an interesting one here from Ursula Anwer, who asked, did religion play a role in how Haiti was viewed at the time, perhaps in the periodicals that you're studying?
Yes, I mean, I think it's a complicated question. I mean, one way to think about that is a variety of religions. It's kind of surface in the kind of periodical attention to Haiti. In some kind of context in the US, like reporting there is a pronounced anti-Catholic bias, but then also a kind of blurring of African religions and Eastern religions. So the Black Vampire, for example, I think is a really kind of fascinating text in that sense, and it's most likely written by a white American, but it's kind of imagining at different moments forms of Islam, forms of voodoo, forms of Catholicism as kind of conjoining with vampirism to define a kind of Black radical tradition. So I think you can see a variety of ways in which religions are being othered in terms of those figurations, and kind of again seen as a threat. The kind of, when I'm saying that white ethno state, I also mean within that a early American tradition, right, a Protestant state, and so various forms of religion that are not aligned or not exactly in line with that version of Protestantism are often being deployed as potentially radical and revolutionary and a kind of contagion that people are afraid of in the U.S.
Wynne Kelly is one of our long-term NEH fellows. Asked a question here. She says, your talk suggests that there's a larger early 19th century archive of people and stories that relate to Toussaint Louverture and his hagiography. And she's seen this later in the century in her own work. So the question here is, can you say more about how he plays into the narrative that you tell?
Yeah, Toussaint is and as you know, I mean, a kind of crucial figure that I think takes on more and more symbolic resonance the further one gets from the Haitian Revolution in all kinds of ways, particularly because I think he's imagined as perhaps might have produced a less violent, or fantasized that he might have produced a less violent order than Dessalines in some ways. Toussaint is a kind of reference point in Santé's secret history in an important way. Teresa, a Haitian tale. Toussaint is the kind of George Washington heroic figure leading and saving the Black revolutionaries of Haiti. And so again, functions in that way. There's also, I mean, could never kind of figure out what to do with this, but there's this kind of remarkable play that was produced at commencement to give you a sense of how crucial and important people thought Toussaint was. That was produced for the commencement, written by two graduating seniors, written for the commencement at Dartmouth College in 1804. And it's an imaginary dialogue between Toussaint, who's come back from the dead, and he's going to counsel Dessalines on what the future of Haiti should be. So I think that gives you a sense that commencement in 1804 at Dartmouth, most of the other plays written is still a tradition at Dartmouth. I think I've been told to have graduating seniors write dramatic plays for commencement. Most of the others are comedies, but this one is an attempt to sort of say this is the most important event going on in the world, and Toussaint has come back from the dead to tell Dessalines how to make Haiti, ensure Haiti's peaceful future. And I hope that's answered your question. Being long-winded, sorry.
Oh, that was great. Thank you, Duncan. We've come to the end of the hour. So I want to thank you once again for a fantastic presentation. Unfortunately, we have to stop here. I do want to, before we conclude, just remind the audience that we have a rather jam-packed schedule of events at AAS this spring, and all of which these information about these can be found on our website. And one thing of note in particular is that we have in early May a two-day symposium for our Historic Children's Voices project. And you can learn more about how to register either in person or virtually on the page for that. Our next program is going to be on Tuesday, April 16th, when Robin Bernstein will be here in conversation with Robert Quashie about her new book, Freeman's Challenge, The Murder That Shook America's Original Prison for Profit. And that will be a hybrid program, both in person here at Antiquarian Hall and also online streamed in this case through Zoom. Our next virtual book talk will be on April 25th, and that will feature Lara Langer Cohen, and she will talk about her recent book with a really great title, Going Underground, Race, Space, and the Subterranean in the 19th Century United States. And once again, you can learn about all these programs on the AS website, and you can also view Duncan's talk very soon on our YouTube channel. And with that, we're going to conclude for today. We thank you very much for attending. Thank you, Duncan. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks. And I'm happy to, if people want to email me, I'm happy to answer questions if I didn't get a chance. And thank you so much for coming in. Thanks, John, and thanks, Stephanie. And Lara's book is fantastic. Highly recommend that.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Bye.